Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel discussion. Again, the panel topic for today is called Brand Building Strategies for Startup and SMEs. Now, this topic resonates with me a lot, and I'm super passionate about this, especially in my daily line of work, working with SMEs. Again, my name is Nadhirah, and I'm a Senior Business Advisor from SME Center. We are an arm of Enterprise Singapore. I have with me today Raja, the Director of Marketing at Tech in Asia, and Swati, the Chief Digital Strategist at Hoppingo. So before we start, maybe our panelists, Raja and Swati, you may want to introduce yourself further and what you do at Tech in Asia and Hoppingo, helping brands to build their strategies. So maybe I can start the ball rolling with Raja first. Raja, go ahead. You can introduce yourself.
Okay, hi. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Uh, as Nadhirah introduced, I lead Marketing in Tech in Asia, which is a leading English media tech publication that focuses on startup in Asia. So I've been doing marketing for well over 16 years, and brand building, growth strategies, go-to-market strategies for startups and SMEs always been my passion area, which I've been doing for the last few years. So I'm looking forward to discussing more today. Thanks.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Raja. How about you, Swati? Do introduce yourself to the audience today. We have about 61 participants, tuning in.
Right. Hi, Nadhirah. So my name is Swati, and I have over 10 years of experience in digital marketing. I worked with some of the blue chip clients, while I was in Group M, which is the media agency. But the last 5 years have been, working with startups and SMEs, and the challenges are very different. But it's also very interesting because, when you get to grow a startup or an SME, it's a different feeling altogether. So I've enjoyed that. And we've also developed an in-house marketing platform called Hoppingo, which is basically a platform that facilitates discovery of products and, of course, online and offline. And I'm looking forward to speaking about branding here.
Perfect, perfect. So in my line of work, I've met a lot of SMEs from different industries, and they come from different company sizes. Also, we have the micro SMEs and the larger ones. But especially with the recent pandemic and COVID-19, it has affected a lot of company, and it actually pushes brands to rethink their strategies and embark on digital solutions to actually reach out to their target audience. In my line of work, a lot of SMEs come to us for assistance. They want to know how can they relook at their business plan and embark on different strategies to grow, especially with everything that is going on now. I can also let you know a bit about one success story that we had recently. So this renowned skincare company in Singapore, I'm not able to let the audience know their name, but they are one of the renowned skincare companies in Singapore. They are very much service-based company. So they do customer walk-ins, analyze the skin of their customers and do the necessary treatments. The business used to be running on healthy profits prior to COVID-19 with constant appointment bookings. But due to the pandemic outbreak, right, the business actually faced a hefty financial loss incurred during circuit breaker because they were not able to get customers to walk in anymore. Because circuit breaker, everything stopped. They couldn't operate. They couldn't get customers to come in. And the phase 1 and 2 restrictions and social distancing after that slowly allowed them to have a stream of customers in, but they were not able to take as many customers as before because of all the social distancing and rules, right? So because of that, the business was running really on a very tight profit margin. So we had to relook into their business model, and we realized that they can expand from another vertical. So instead of being just like a service-oriented business, they can also start packaging their own skincare products or their own DIY kits to get it to their customers, but via online channels. So they don't really have to have the customers coming in, right? So this was helping them to rethink and to know that they can expand from just a service-oriented business to also product-oriented. So even if there's limitations in the number of people they can tend to daily, they are still able to generate profits from other streams. So because of that, when they are taking in a new vertical, moving from service-oriented to also product-oriented, they had to relook into their branding as a whole. So a rebranding was needed to provide them with a clearer brand and marketing strategy moving forward, a better marketing framework to appeal to their current and potentially new target audience. So with a proper strategic plan, they are able to improve their brand levers and customer communication, increase communication of their brand to their customers. So because of that, right, we actually went ahead to apply for the strategic branding grant under Enterprise Singapore with a certified consultant of their choice. Now, the consultant then brought them through a journey, like a 3 to 6 months journey, to help them to build a branding and marketing roadmap for the next 1 to 3 years. Now, I can tell you that the business is slowly picking up with this new revenue stream. And, the clients are really happy that they can reach out to a wider target audience with this new innovative way. So, Raja and Swati, I know that you've also been working with a lot of startups and SMEs to drive their brand building efforts and achieve their growth goals. So maybe I can pose this question to start off. What is your definition of branding, and what are some branding misconceptions you've heard based on the engagements you've had helping all these startups and SMEs build their brand? Maybe I can start with Raja first. You can get the ball rolling because you've collaborated with many tech startups and SMEs to help them achieve their brand and growth goals, right, in recent years. So maybe Raja, I can pose this question to you first, and then Swati can come in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a foundational question. It's a pretty important question as well. So, I mean, to understand the concept of branding, it is very important to understand what is brand, So it is important that we understand the concept of brand, and then we think and talk about branding. So brand is nothing but the difference when you say that I'm going to attend an online meeting versus I'm going to do a Zoom meeting, or I'm going to do a Google Hangout meeting. So that is the kind of difference that brand kind of like puts you in front of your customers, your prospects. Yeah. So when you talk about a product or services about a seller, the kind of image that you kind of picture in your mind, the perspective that you get, the idea that you get, the gut feeling that you get is all about what a brand is, right? And when we are talking about branding, right, the whole process of kind of like creating and then shaping this brand image or this brand idea in your consumer's mind is branding, right? Or you could even say for tech startups, I mean, these days is all about user experience, and it's not just about delivering the product or service what the users or customers have signed up for, right? So maybe you could also, at a much more macro level, you can say branding is nothing but getting your product and services, transforming your product and services from being a commodity to an experience. So that's what in my view, I see branding.
That's great. Actually, Raja, you pointed out something important about branding, which is the process of creating an image in the consumer's mind. So it's got a lot to do with psychology, actually. And for me, I honestly, I can tell you, sometimes daily we do get SMEs coming to us and telling us, hey, why is branding so important? I just design my own logo lah. That's it. Why need to think about brand value, brand messaging? Why do we need to do that? So Swati, maybe you can jump in here to add on to what Raja mentioned about brand being an image of perception and the whole entire process of creating an image in the consumer's mind. Maybe putting your brand at the TOMA, which is the top of mind awareness of a consumer's mind. Swati, maybe you can come in and let us know what is your view on this.
Right. So I think the definition has been rightly put, that it's the perception that a user has about your brand or a product. And, to your point where people say, why is it important? And, what are some of the misconceptions? One is it's not even an option. I mean, you will anyways have a perception about a product, whether the brand chooses to do branding or not. consumers still will have a perception. Now, if consumers will have a perception, then you might as well want to think through that what the consumers would want to feel about your brand, right? So that's the process that, in fact, to that point, even if I'm talking, people will have a perception about me, and that's like a brand, personal perception. So I might as well think through this before I talk, that what is the kind of perception I want people to have about me. So it's not just you, it's about everything that you do around your brand that basically drives a perception in a user's mind. I mean, I will have a perception. If I have no perception, then I'm definitely not buying a product from. So that's bad news. So there should be a perception. That's one. And if you want to develop a perception, that it should be a good one. And we'll come to how and what the branding process could be. But whenever we speak to brands in the first 5 minutes, and it's always mostly a marketing brief that we're talking about, whether the branding strategy has been thought through or not, because of the kind of questions we ask, and we know within the first 5 minutes whether they have thought through the branding strategy or not. Because for most brands, like you mentioned, it's all about logo, but logo is just a subset of brand identity, to be honest. It's not even brand identity. It's almost like one part of brand identity.
Yeah.
So that, and everybody needs it, like I said, because the perception is being formed any which ways. Even if it's like a hawker place, I will have a perception of that. So it is important. It is the perception that one has. It is not about what I keep talking about myself. I can say like million things, and I can say, I'm the best, but that does not matter. It is about how a consumer perceives it, right? And a lot of effort needs to be put in that direction. So some of the conceptions, like, again, logo is important. It's only for the bigger brands. It is something that's a one-time effort. No, it's something that only has to be done by the marketing team. Again, a big no, because it has to reflect across your company. Even if somebody is in the customer care, they need to understand what your brand stands for, because they are frontlining the whole thing. So these are some of the things I feel are very important for startups and SMEs to know when they begin their marketing initiatives.
Right. I think the both of you said some really good points about perception. And when it comes to perception, I feel that SMEs also need to know and define their target audience, because it's always no one size shoe fits all. I realize that a lot of SMEs, they come in and they say, oh, my product is for everyone, But part of this perception and defining your target market, also building the brand strategy, is about creative messaging. As you rightly put, it triggers the emotions of people. So when we talk about creative messaging and brand storytelling, how can brands capitalize on this and express it in the digital era? I can pose this to both of you. Maybe, Swati, you may want to start first on this. Since
Sure.
I think Hoppingo, you mentioned that Hoppingo is also an in-house marketing platform. So companies can help to discover their products and through content marketing and product sampling.
Right. So I think when it comes to brand storytelling, I sincerely believe that it's about identifying the brand's why and then telling that to the consumers. I mean, forget about the product and the service for a while. It's about really being authentic and talking about your own self, your own story, and why you're doing what you're doing. That triggers an emotion that nothing else does. So, which is where brand storytelling becomes very important. Everybody needs to know why you're doing this. So, for example, we are into, I personally have a brand which is into kids education. Now, it's a fairly new brand, but whenever we speak to parents and tell them our why, that gives them more confidence than any marketing collateral that I can ever put in front of them. So it is the why, and you should sincerely believe in your why. It should come from a place which is more very authentic, and if that is put across, I think it's much more valuable than spending marketing dollars and putting banners in front of your audience. So yeah, that's my point of storytelling. So it should be your why, which is very strongly put across to your audience.
That's good. That's good. For Raja, because you've worked mainly with tech startups and SMEs, right? How can these tech startups and SMEs also resonate with the whole notion of brand storytelling? Is it applicable to them, or is brand storytelling only applicable to certain industries? What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, So my thoughts are, so when it comes to like messaging, when it comes to communication as a brand, it all goes back to, I mean, we kind of like jump few guns here, since we are talking about the storytelling part already. So it goes back to the purpose, which kind of like Swati touched upon. So why you as a brand even exist in the first place, and what you're trying to solve, and then why do people care about it, right? So all these things should kind of like guide you on how you're going to have your brand personality, right? So when it comes to that one, right, so having a very authentic, kind of like brand identity for yourself is always very good. You have to be true to yourself and to your prospects and customers. So try to be very authentic, and then beyond being authentic is also important for you to listen to your customers, to your prospects, to the community, whatever that you're serving for, and then trying to be empathetic as well, right? And then COVID has taught us all that words and communication emotionally appealing is one thing, but the bigger thing is actually putting that into action. That's where some brands really stood out last year, when we all were caught up in a very uncertain situation, when we are completely unprepared, right? So when it comes to like startups and how they can do the narratives, and then how they can become a much more stronger brand storyteller, being authentic, being empathetic, and then listening to your customers, and then giving a feel that you understand them, you understand the pain points, and then these are the ways that you are able to help them out, through not only through your communication, through your words and text, but also through your actions. That would definitely take you much more higher heights when it comes to branding and establishing your brand in the longer run.
That's good. You mentioned about brand identity and defining your brand identity. I do get sometimes that SMEs, they get very confused in terms of the brand identity and the founder's identity. What are some ways that they can, or some strategies that they can think of to define their brand identity? How do they start to even look into this and define their brand identity? Raja, maybe you want to hop on this?
Okay. I mean, having a very strong founder to back a startup is a good problem to have. We all associate with Tesla or SpaceX with Elon Musk, and a lot many more, even like Virgin Atlantic. So people would know the person behind. So that's a good problem to have. But in the sense of when we are talking about brand identity, this goes back to the key pillars for your brand building efforts, right? So formulating the brand strategy in terms of what's your purpose, and then what's your brand promise, and working out your mission and vision and all those things. And then when you work on brand identity, which is exactly how people going to identify you from the rest, through your visuals, your packaging, and things like that. So, when you talk about brand identity, you are actually telling yourself, how do I want to stand out from the rest? What is that I could do to make myself stand out? Um, when we talk about this whole brand strategy, those purpose, if you kind of like really have the right purpose, and then the right segment of the audience that you want to target, when you ensure all this proper brand elements are intact, it's going to create a very solid foundation for you to have a very strong brand identity. When you actually talk about the visual elements, your packaging elements, your like tone of voice and brand personality, everything would formulate into brand identity, where you can actually stand out from the rest of the brands, or even from your competition. um, uh, in terms of how you can go out, there are a few ways that the startups can think about. When we talk about brand identity and positioning yourself, right? Um, Smaller brands, when they are competing against the titans, right? When I say titans, it's about the big budget brands. You can't actually compete them in the same level, at the same game, right? Because it's not a level playing field. So probably you need to have certain tactical areas, while the strategic area is the branding strategy, which I spoke about. While you have to focus on every single thing, that itself going to create a very strong foundation for brand identity. At a very tactical level, you can think about, do I, as a startup, as an SME, if I want to create a solid brand identity for myself, uh, if I can't compete at the same way like my bigger brands that I'm competing against, I can't be a category leader in that standpoint. So can I be a thought leader, right? What are the other ways by which I can really stand out to establish my brand identity? Things that would create value for my customers to my prospects. So one area that you could explore would be, if I can't spend, or if I don't have the other resources, like how the bigger budget brands do, can I position myself as a thought leader? Can that be my identity? Or even the other means would be, how do you actually spin the context around the problem around? For example, when we take the category chocolates, there's only little things that you could do with chocolate. There is no real meaningful USP that lies in chocolates. It comes with almonds, it doesn't come with almond, it comes with milk, it doesn't come with milk, no sugar, less sugar. But it's not really an USP, right? So if you look at this particular brand, which I personally like the way they position the brand, which is like a Snickers. So instead of actually talking about the features of the product, to create an identity for the product of particular brand, right? They then started handling or tackling the much bigger problem, which is hunger, right? If you look at the commercials and anything, they kind of position as, they kind of like include the branding, that brand is something that helps, satisfies people who are like starving or hungry. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, look around the context of what your product and services is trying to solve, and trying to see how you can spin, how you can look the problem, how you can frame the problem in a different way that gives you an upper hand, right? So it's all about framing. In Snickers case, instead of just talking about the product, the chocolates, how delicious it is, they then took the hunger part of it, right? So similarly, around your product and services, think about the context and then see what areas that your competition hasn't picked up, where you have a brighter chance to stand out, and pick it out, and then you sprint it out and then see how it works for you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Raja. So far for this building a brand strategy, I think what we have talked about is that it's all got to do with the perception, your consumer's mind, defining your target audience, defining your brand identity, finding your value and your purpose. Swati, from your end, you've also worked with a lot of SMEs and helped them to grow their content and their marketing. Maybe you can also share your point of view about why an SME actually needs to define their brand identity and looking at the problem that they're trying to solve and making their brand like a solution for that problem, and therefore highlighting their niche or their USP, their unique selling proposition, so that they can reach out and communicate better to their target audience.
Sure. So, again, that goes back to your earlier question as well, which are both related, that whenever we start any branding activity for a brand, the first step is always to understand the people behind that brand, because when you understand, because they will have a huge effect on the brand, the kind of decisions they will take whenever there's a crisis, or the kind of decisions they will take when they have to expand the brand. Everything it comes from the founder. So the first step is always understanding the founder and then arriving on the brand archetype. And once we arrive on the brand archetype, that's when we start, then it becomes all about the brand. Then it becomes all about what the brand stands for, what are the things that we can do to reinforce the emotion that we've identified that should be the strongest emotion. So for example, we were recently working for a brand and they said, by all means, this looks like a brand which is sage. Now how do we build on that, that it is a brand, and there are a lot of brands out there that fall in that category. There are 12 archetypes and a lot of brands fall in sage as a category. But what do you do to build that? You can't be fun, you can't be talking, you have to be very informative as a brand. Now everything that has to be developed around that, be it your identity, be it your tagline, your messaging, everything will revolve around that one word that we've picked up, and that comes from who the founders are and what is their idea of the brand and what are their personal values. That has a huge effect on the brand. So it's a step-by-step process, and from there on, you go on to create things which are collaterals, marketing collaterals, imagery, everything follows. But the first step is to identify what's the brand archetype that your brand actually falls under. So, to answer your question, it is something that happens over a period of time. It doesn't happen at one go because, you're reinforcing something on people. So reinforcement happens over a period of time, but in your idea, so whenever we do a project, there's always a guideline that we create. And that guideline is, right. So I have my child going to school, so I'm sorry about
It's all right.
that. Uh, so yeah, so it's about reinforcing that, going back every time that you have a question in your head, going back to that branding guideline that should answer all the questions, that should actually become a guiding sort of a booklet for anything and everything that you do in future. Even when we do this activity, we also make sure that we tell the brands what is the kind of imagery that they can use, because there are so many images and brands tend to pick up anything that they want to. Or we go to Shutterstock, we picked up any image that we want to. That's not how it is, right? Because you have a guideline, you should know that there is, these are not the kind of images you will pick up. Even if it comes from any Shutterstock or any photography service, you're not picking up anything, you're picking up only these images. So those guidelines should be laid out, and they should be followed by every member of the SME or a startup, and more so by the marketing team, because they are responsible for making sure that the word goes out. So these are some of the steps that can help brands in the longer run and are very essential for a brand to build a strong brand in the long run.
That's great. That's great. And you mentioned something about brand archetypes. Now, for me and us in the branding sphere, we know what is branding archetype, and there are 12 different archetypes that SME may resonate with, and not just one archetype. They might have like a mix of sage, or they might have, yeah, correct. So basically, maybe for the audience, a lot of the SMEs that I know also, they don't know what exactly is a brand archetype. Maybe you can just share a line or two about what is a brand archetype.
Sure. So it's basically laying the foundation and saying what is the kind of, and some of the archetypes that they're out there are some of them are very much related to fun, and you may say my brand lies somewhere in between. So how do I balance that? So the other way where we also go about doing this is that we understood from the brand, from the founders, that what your brand archetype should be. Now let's look at the audience. Is the audience really ready to hear the kind of messaging that you want to say? Are they, if they are slightly in a category which is 50 above, do you really want to have like a fun conversation with them? So which is where you make a decision as to where exactly do you stand in terms of brand archetype. And brand archetypes are, it could be a lover brand, that's one of the archetypes, where you basically have a very, if I am not putting it incorrectly, a romantic relationship with your consumers, right? So you do everything possible through your messaging, through your imagery, through all your marketing collaterals, that you have like a very romantic relationship with your
I think
consumers.
Sorry, just to jump in there, because you talked about a lover brand. I think a good example of that is actually Häagen-Dazs. So the ice cream brand Häagen-Dazs, if you can see from all their marketing collaterals and their commercials, it's very much about romance and how people are really enjoying seductively their ice cream, like for example.
Right, absolutely. See, and immediately that comes to your mind, right? So they've done a good job of establishing that brand, because the moment I said love or romance, that brand came to your mind. So this is what we're talking about, right? Are you doing, and they've never said it, we are a lover brand. They've never said it openly that, we stand for romance. I mean, an ice cream brand would never say that, right? Yeah. But still you associate, because there are imageries that are related. There is, messaging that's related to a lover brand. So which is what I'm saying, that, to understand that brand archetype is the first step. And a lot of effort is actually laid in that step. So we say that, we do 5 steps. First is your discovery, and discovery not just with consumers as what they're looking for, but even discovery with founders, like I said, because they do have a impact. And then we go about doing research otherwise, to the larger consumer base and so on and so forth. And then you develop like a marketing, a branding guideline or a roadmap saying this is what your brand should stand for. Then you test it out with the consumers, right? if I say this, what do you think is the perception? Or even otherwise, if I have 10 customers, doesn't make a difference whether you have 1,000 customers, 10,000. If your 10 customers say the same thing, this is what I feel about this messaging, then your job is done. Then maybe you're going in the right direction. So it's also about testing, some of the messaging that you have. So yeah, it's a process which is slightly iterative sometimes, because till the time you arrive at, what you think your brand is able to convey.
Right, Raja, I believe you've also had a lot of experience on this, and you also mentioned earlier about, some of these smaller brands and startups, them comparing themselves to the bigger brands, and them saying that, okay, I don't have as much budget as the bigger brands, but and a lot of people think that to do a good job in branding, they need to spend a lot of money on advertising or finding an influencer to promote it. So maybe you can share with us, whether you agree with this, and what are some of the digital tools out there that SMEs can tap on to further enhance their brand and their content online.
Okay. It depends on what is your brand, what is your business goals, and what's your brand goals, right? For example, those who are living in Singapore might have seen like a month or 2 months ago when Disney Plus launched in Singapore.
Yeah.
It was like a big brand activation, right? So they kind of like went and then they took over all the prominent landmarks in Singapore, be it Fullerton Hotel or Singapore Flyers or Arts and
MRT stations.
MRT station. You name it. So they kind of like took over, right? And then they had like close to a year long planning for the same. And then probably they had like army of people supporting that. And then probably they would have burnt like millions of dollars in a matter of few hours. Right. So let's take this brand activation, which a brand has done, right? We are not talking about the outcome of it, but they did it. In a similar context, say for example, if a small like early stage startup B2B uh, whose solution is like providing cybersecurity to e-commerce solution. So can they do the same level of activation? Yeah, so they could like very well project on Singapore Flyer. They project like laser projection on like Fullerton Hotel. Probably those activations could give them exposure and brand awareness, but does it make sense for the brand? Is it going to help? Definitely not, right? So the point that I'm trying to make with this analogy is it purely depends what is that you would like to achieve and what is sensible for you to achieve, right? So a lot of startups that I work with from my own experience, they don't have a very strong organic media support, in the sense they may not have a strong organic search results, they may not get organic visits, they may not, even their social media pages may not have like many followers. And then if they do activations based on this one, it may not have a meaningful impact. So in that case, right, it kind of makes sense for them to kind of like invest on paid media in a sensible way that would help them scale that visibility. But then here, how much is purely depends on what is the level of scale that they would like to achieve, which would provide them a meaningful impact, right? So having said this one, to answer your question, right? So if I need to do branding, is it mandatory that I need to spend? Not necessarily. All based upon what you would like to achieve, right? Meaningful result. At the same time, as a SMEs and as a startup founder, you also need to be smart in terms of how do you use your ecosystem? What are the various avenues that you have? Own media, we understand the challenge that the reach, the impact may not be that much like an established brands. With a little exposure, you may not have a meaningful impact. Think about a sensible expenditure that makes sense, and also think about strategic partnership. There are other avenues that would help you, right? So strategic partnerships, or even you can use your existing customers to kind of do some referral marketing, and all those things could help you with your branding effort. Maybe having a realistic target, maybe starting your brand campaign small and then gradually progressing. So this would be the approach that I would say that startups should consider.
That's great. Yeah. So Swati, what are your thoughts on what Raja mentioned about own media versus paid media and also referral marketing? What other tools do you feel, or maybe it can be even digital tools that, you know, a lot of startups are unaware of, or SMEs are unaware of, that they can actually utilize to help their brand grow further and reach out to a wider, you know, target audience?
Right. Before I get there, let me just also, emphasize on one little point.
Mm-hmm.
Branding is very different from brand awareness.
Yep.
Okay, so they are two independent things. You could very well do a branding strategy, have a branding guideline, and a brand awareness campaign is basically to spread that, right? To make sure that a lot more people know about it. But they're not. It's not like you have to spend millions of dollars. You can't compete with big corporates. That's these are two very different things. So branding, in any case, like I said, it's not an option. It should be done. It must be done, even by anybody who's like a single member founder as well, because people are going to have a perception. For brand awareness, and I say this and I often get caught because not a nice thing to say, but your
Mm-hmm.
marketing IQ is always indirectly proportional to the budget that you have, because the more the budget that you have, the less you'll think about it, so you'll have
Yep.
like, I have so many ways to spend that. But if you have less budgets, you tend to think a little more, right? So
Yes.
you tend to look at novel ways of spreading your message. And I sincerely believe that partnerships are the way to go. It's not a tool. It's a dedicated effort that one needs to put in. But identifying partners who probably have the same target audience, but it's a non-conflicting brand, right? We are seeing a lot of very successful partnerships because even the bigger brands are now not very comfortable spending millions of dollars in just doing some activities. Like, for example, Hershey's, and there's a cosmetic brand. They kind of tied up, and they came up with something which is very cute. Like, both the brands were cross promoting each other. So partnerships are a way to go. So even for a startup and SME, go about finding brands that have like a similar target audience segment. And we do it for a lot of for example, our last campaign was for somebody who's reaching out to mothers, right? And there's so
Mm-hmm.
many other brands who reach out to mothers. Even if you have like 1,000 very dedicated subscribers, it's good enough for a brand to say, let's partner, right? So keep looking for partners, and that's probably the best way. And again, going back to, when you're identifying your partners should have the same brand values as yours. You can't have somebody as a partner who doesn't share your brand values. I mean, if you're a fun brand, for example, you can't go about having a partnership with somebody who's really serious as a brand. So you have to identify what are the brand values. If they match, the target audience match, then there is a lot of merit in going about doing a campaign which is a win-win for both.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. So for those who are just joining us today, what we've discussed so far for the past 40 minutes or so, we talked about how branding is all about creating an image in your consumer's mind. It's all about perception. So to build a good branding strategy, firstly, you need to define your target audience. Secondly, you need to define your brand identity. You know what we talked about increasing the value or the purpose of your brand. Think about what is the problem that you're trying to solve and how your brand can raise their own awareness and niche from that. And thirdly, we touched a bit about brand archetypes also, which kind of had to do with your brand character, how your brands take on different characters, and that affects your marketing channels and your marketing communication. Fourth, we talked about how the different marketing strategies you can use: paid media, owned media, referral marketing, as Raja puts it. And part of referral marketing, I also feel actually crosses with what Swati mentioned about building partnerships. Because if you build a good partnership with somebody who shares the same target audience as you, another company that shares the same target audience as you, and you complement each other's brand, you can also raise both your brand's value and awareness from there. Because to me, a lot of SMEs think that they look at other brands that are in the same industry as as competition, but you shouldn't look at it in that way. Every brand is like an opportunity to collaborate if they are defining the same target audience as you, and they are to complement each other. So it's not all about competition sometimes. And then we also talked about how brand awareness is kind of different from branding. Now it's about 11:30. We have 10 minutes for question and answer. So for the participants that are tuned in now, I see that there are 59 participants, nearly 60 participants here. If you see the chat box in your Zoom, if you have any questions for our panel related to branding, do put it in our chat box here, and I can raise it up to the panel so that they can answer your queries, anything to do with the branding.
Oh,
Yes.
actually, Nadhirah, just to correct you there, it's actually in the Q&A box, not the chat box.
Oh, okay. Q&A box. Are we? Because I'm not sure whether. Okay, there is a question on Q&A box. Okay, thank you so much, Lorraine.
You're welcome.
Xavier. So, all right. So we do have a question here, and I think this question can be answered by both our panelists, Raja and Swati. So perhaps, Swati, you may want to start first. The question is by Mark Tan. He asked, how do you recover from a negative brand image?
I think, and when I say negative brand image, I'm assuming something went wrong. You know, there's a consumer complaint, or it's all about accepting, because people are forgiving, right? So they're not like, imagine we deal with so many brands on an everyday basis. I mean, you have problems with one brand or the other. It's about the way they handle negative feedback or an experience gone wrong. So I think there's nothing negative if it's handled positively. So, and your brand guideline should clearly say if something goes wrong, and this is exactly something that we do provide in the brand guideline, and it comes from the values that the brand has. If something goes wrong, what do you do then? Do you apologize to the consumer? Do you give a refund to them? Do you also give something which is like a feel good thing? So all of that, if it's defined already, there's no confusion, right? Even your customer care representative doesn't need to say that, oh, let me just check with my boss and get back to you. He is empowered enough through that brand guideline to be able to take a decision, and the customer would love it. I mean, we have seen that customers do change their feedback. They openly express that how they had some grudge against a brand, but how the brand went way and beyond to make sure that the customer is happy at the end of it. And there's always, amicable resolution that can be achieved. So, it can be resolved.
Right. Raja, what is your take on this? For example, if an SME or a startup, especially for startups and SMEs within the first 2 years, I think building that brand is very important for them to strive and expand. So how do they actually recover if there was a negative image on them or something negative related to the company, or maybe they even wrote like insensitive content that affected a lot of their target customers? So how do they recover from that negative brand image?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Swati said. Perhaps time and again we have been like seeing brands, the communication going wrong, and then they come under like a lot of fire from the people. So I think here is you have to own. So if it's like something has gone wrong purely from your side, so own it up. Don't shy away from apologizing on the public format. So that's when people know you are like absolutely transparent. You're very authentic to what you stand for. And these are a very good opportunity for you to kind of like instill the confidence that you as a brand, you stand for the value that you are creating, right? So own up your mistakes and apologize. Don't shy away. Don't run away from that. Just manage, and then customers or even people are like much more forgiving if you're like really true being yourself. by owning it up and then apologizing. And we have seen so many brands. I don't remember, I was trying to recollect any specific examples, but I couldn't able to recollect. But we have seen, if you go to Google or any other search engine and then like look for like crisis management for brands, and then see how some brands have like really owned up the mistakes and then came back shining, and even the brand kind of like increased to a much more higher with the episode, with the way they managed. And then again, when we are talking about this one, right, while being transparent and then owning up to your mistake is important thing, but the speed of response, speed of action is also another thing. So if you're reacting to it like a week later or 1 month later, it's a different thing altogether. So that you have to be like really like time sensitive, and then you have to be like really authentic, right? So you do need like a larger crisis communication team formulating how we should respond, and then working with the legal team and like other communication team, just to ensure that your communication response is all properly checked.
That's true.
So getting somebody from the higher up, for example, right, sending out the response in a very true, authentic way, no flashy or no polished communication, just very raw communication. That itself would do. Speed of action is very key as well.
Right. So actually, from Mark's question, it's really timely that it came in now, because about a day or two, I think Emmy Cakes, because I signed up for Emmy Cakes subscription, so they actually had an email subject header that said "Shut up and take my money." That was the subject header. And then an hour later, there was an apology email that came to the masses to say that their management was really sorry about this communication. They owned up to it. As you mentioned, they were transparent about it. And I think that evoked that sense of, credibility back. So I hope, Mark, we've answered your question. There are actually two more questions that came in. So let me quickly get on to these two questions before our time runs out. So first question by Nilofer. Maybe I can point this to Raja. Okay, if you have a limited budget, how would you best utilize it from the branding perspective? I think Raja mentioned a bit about it earlier just now. So maybe you want to just rehash this in a sentence or two.
Okay. So if you have a limited budget, understand there's a budget constraint. What I would suggest is look for all the possible avenues. One of my favorite thing always I do is strategic partnership. So go find the strategic partners who kind of like have a similar synergy to the products and servicing to the customers that you are also servicing. So it would naturally give you a much greater lift. And then also trying to leverage on your existing loyal group of customers to see if they can help you spread the word, and then bring you a lot of referral people that you can convert as the customers. And beyond that, you have to determine what particular brand goals you want to achieve, right? So when it comes to your brand marketing strategy, then think about what particular aspect of brand goals you want to achieve, right? So is it about driving more visibility to your business? Then for that one, then determine what is the KPIs that you think is meaningful. For example, it could be in terms of the number of visits you want to get. I'm keeping it very tactical here. So in terms of number of visits you want to get because you have a new product or service that you want people to check it out, or it's like your new go-to-market. You have not been in this market. You are entering into a new market, so you kind of want to get some visibility among the target group. So then determine what working from the goal backwards. So if you want to achieve certain business goals and what it means in terms of tactical vanity metrics, then with that one, then you plan out how much you want to spend, what channels you want to spend, depending upon where your target customers are. Try to leverage your own media as much as possible. And then for B2B businesses in particular, try to leverage on your contact database. Probably you might be capturing their newsletter like signups. You must be doing newsletter signups, right? So try to leverage through your newsletters or your EDMs. There isn't any additional cost for it. You only need to pay for your email service provider. And then, try to work with community partners. Some people are ready to promote your product, like a barter trade, cover you and you cover me kind of thing. So you don't need to pay anything for it.
Yes, I think you brought up again the point about how important it is for brands, especially the smaller brands. If you don't have enough budget, what you can do is that you can actually leverage on partnerships. I think it's very important to grow together, and those people that share the same value, your brand value as you, these are some people to consider to complement your brand. Also, what Raja mentioned specifically is in terms of leveraging on your contact database. I think it's important and something a lot of brands overlook, that you don't even collect your clients or prospects database. So you should look into investing into like a CRM tool, a client relationship management tool, so that you can actually have, a list of all your clients' emails and all that, so you can push out newsletters to them. Okay, so I don't have much time, but I really want to answer this one question, because it's one question by SL. So the question is directed to Swati. How does Hoppingo, or maybe even other digital marketing platforms, help a new market entrant brand, which means a startup, in a beauty and fitness wear?
Right. So specifically the platform, what it does is, we do content marketing on Hoppingo. And we've also started something which is sampling, where we can place samples in Panda Mart deliveries. So we did a interesting campaign around Chinese New Year, where there was this brand called SES, and they were wanting to sample their cookies. So every Panda Mart delivery, which and there was people who were ordering mandarin oranges, to make sure that we are targeting the right audience, were getting those cookies as a gift from the brand. So sampling activities is something that we do with Panda Mart as a way of discovery of products. And it's not just sampling activity, because this is usually brands were shying away from sampling activities because there was a lot of wastage. But here it's very targeted. Plus, we're also able to insert a communication with the sample, where the user then goes back to the portal, keys in their feedback, and then there is a way to again reach out to them, because there is also remarketing that we are doing. So it's end-to-end discovery of products by actually placing the products in the hands of the consumers, and the right consumers, because they're targeted consumers, and then driving sales through remarketing. So there's an end-to-end marketing strategy that we propose using our platform. And like to Nadhirah's point, any other platform, you should be looking at an end-to-end activity. You should not just be looking at how do I expose more people to my product, how do I even drive sales, right? Because that's the ultimate aim. So right from exposure to driving sales, what does that funnel look like? That's an important thing that every brand that's coming online or wants to do digital marketing should be able to answer for themselves.
All right, thank you so much, Raja and Swati. So I think that's about all the time that we have for this panel discussion. But before we end, I would like to just sum up some key takeaways, because we do have attendees who's asking for it and just joined in. So basically, again, today we talked about how brands, small startups or SMEs can build their brand strategy moving forward, right? And we talk about how branding is all about perception and getting into the TOMA, which is your top of mind awareness in your consumer's mind. And to do that, firstly, you have to define your target market. Secondly, you need to define your brand identity. What is your value? What is your purpose? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And thirdly, we touched a bit about brand archetype or character, how different brands actually communicate better when they have their character or archetypes defined. Right. Fourth, we talked about the different ways of marketing. So we talked about own media, paid media, and also the importance of building partnerships and referral marketing. So for those with limited budget, that is what you may want to do. Collate your customers' contact database so that you can push out, proper newsletters on communication, new activities that are coming out of your brand. And lastly, we also talked about, how brands should be very much authentic to yourself. If there were any mistakes that you did and you had a negative brand image in your consumer's mind, own up to it. so people can appreciate the truthfulness that you are owning up to your mistakes and recover from that negative brand image. So those are just, some of the key points that we talked about during this panel discussion on how to build brand awareness. As for, we've had questions about how some of the participants here can get in touch with the speakers today. I believe that their LinkedIn are already, our LinkedIn is already being placed in the chat box of this particular Zoom call. So you can connect with us via LinkedIn. I think that's all we have for today. Raja and Swati, do you have anything to add on?
No, I absolutely enjoyed, listening to Swati, as well as, the moderation, as well as the questions from the audience today. Thanks.
Yeah, Swati, how about you?
Thank you.
Anything to add on?
Thank you so much for having me. It was quite nice, and you've summarized it really well. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you so much, everyone who's tuned in to our panel discussion today. All three of us appreciate it, and we sincerely hope that you had a good takeaway from our discussion today. Laureen, over to you.
All right, thanks, Nadhirah, and of course, I'm pretty sure everybody here enjoyed your session. You guys, let's say thank you to Raja, Swati, and Nadhirah on a phenomenal job well done. Thank you so much. It was insightful. It was just so easy to listen to. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for being part of the SME Digital Fest 2021. I wish you guys all the best going forward, and please feel free to stay on with us throughout the rest of the day. We have more panel discussions and presentations coming up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Exabytes. Grow your business online.